We have a football analyst in the first half hour, and then a baseball analyst in the second half hour. I'm sorry to say, boy, am I sorry to say this. Oh, the Red Sox beat the Yankees today 12-1. They got 17 hits. They have beaten the Yankees 8 straight times. And what could be worse for a Yankee fan than not only to lose all the time, but to lose to the Red Sox? This is unfathomable. However, it doesn't mean that the Yankees can't go from here. They've got, 35, 40 games left. And what they have to do, obviously, is get more consistent. And if they don't, well, maybe they won't make the playoffs. I mean, it happens. They have problems in the bullpen. They have problems in their starting staff. And they have problems scoring runs without hitting home runs. So the Yankees have a ways to go. But this is what I think. And if you say to me, well, is this because you're just a Yankee fan, a Yankee person? I am a Yankee person, my goodness, since I was 8 years old. But forgetting all that, they have to play better. They have to play on the defense. They have to play a lot better. And they have to run the bases a lot better. You put all those things together, now that's why the Yankees have some problems. But you know what? That's the beauty this year of baseball. This year in baseball, it's a lack of consistency. I mean, the Dodgers have, what a team, right? They have a lot of injuries, and they're now tied with San Diego for first place. So anyway, there's a lot going on. One more month to go, and I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it one more time. I'll probably tell it next week as well, because it would be close to September 1st. In the beginning of September in 1964, and I know none of you were born. Well, very few of you were born. But in 1964, I went to Baltimore. It was my first big market. And I got there at the beginning of September, but they didn't want to put my show on. I had the first talk show. Whoa, what a talk. General talk. Whoa. And I had a month. I didn't do anything. Oh, I read a couple of newscasts or whatever. But when I went to Baltimore, the Yankees were 6 games behind the Orioles and the White Sox. And so I was doing nothing at the station, just learning Baltimore. I said, every now and then I do a newscast, big deal. And so what I did was I rooted for the Yankees on a day-by-day basis. I checked Chicago, I checked Baltimore, and obviously the Yankees. And they had this was their final burst. Their last hurrah, because the Yankees were really going downhill. But they pulled themselves together in September, and they overcame a 6-game lead by the White Sox and Orioles, and they won the pennant. And then, as you know, from 65 on, they just disappeared. They'd gotten old. CBS, who at that point owned the team, didn't do anything about it. And it took till the early 70s when Mr. Steinbrenner got here, the boss. And then the Yankees have been the Yankees. Once again, all throughout all these years, they've been terrific. And right now, they are in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. There's a month to go. But that is a story that really is true. And it was great for me because that was my job, I thought, in my mind, my little mind. I'm going to root for them. I'm going to root them in. And darned it didn't happen. Something in baseball, though, happened that the commissioner leaked. I think he leaked it because he wanted to leak it, test the grounds. And there's a rumor, boy, would I hate this, that they would put teams into geographical areas and eliminate the words American League and National League. How could you do that? Now, the reason why baseball is so great, if you start in 1903, which I do, not to knock the players who played great in the 1880s and 1890s, but 1903 is when the American League was formed to oppose the National League. They each had 8 teams. They played the same schedule in their league. You had 7 opponents. You played them 22 times for 154. And the teams in the leagues stayed that way for 50 years until the Braves moved from Boston to Milwaukee. All the two-team cities left. Philly A's went to Kansas City. St. Louis Browns went to Baltimore, so there were no more two-team cities except for Chicago, L.A., and New York, which figures. Anyway, how can I say this? Please don't do that. I grew up with the American League and the National League. I got a job, one of the biggest things in my life, in '83 on the Braves. I was already doing the Hawks, and I'd wanted to do baseball all my life. But I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Bob Fischel, who was the PR director of the Yankees for years and for Bill Veeck in Cleveland, and then in the American League. And you know what Bob Fischel said to me? John, I know you want to do baseball. I'm really happy about that. But you're an American leaguer. You should be in the American League. And, a few years later, I made that with the Yankees and spent the next 36 years there. So I think that would be disgraceful for baseball to eliminate the leagues. Travel, yeah, you got planes. I did it. I didn't miss a game for 38 years in basketball and baseball. So don't tell me it can't be done. You would ruin the fabric of baseball if you go away from the leagues. That can't be done. They want to add 2 more teams to go to 32, which is very divisible. Excellent. But don't you dare eliminate the American League and the National League. I'm going to give you a baseball story. I just thought of it on the way in. And what does this prove? It proves that you're only as good as your last show, your last movie or so. A few years ago, the Baltimore Orioles were an awful team, and they drafted number 1 a switch-hitting catcher named Adley Rutschman. And at midseason one year, they weren't doing well, and they called up Rutschman. And, gee, you could see it. He was such a leader. He was such a good catcher and a switch hitter. And the Orioles started to play better, and you knew it was Rutschman. Then the Orioles became a good team, and Rutschman was their leader. But the Orioles have had a terrible year. They're in last place. And Rutschman has not done well. He hasn't hit well. So the Orioles brought up a catcher named Sam Basallo, and Basallo has played very well. Do you know what happened this week? The Orioles signed Basallo to one of those contracts that they sign young players. So the money won't be extreme, but the player will have security. If I was a young player, boy, I'd sign in a minute. Well, Basallo did. Now you tell me, what's going to happen to Rutschman? They already signed Basallo for 8 years. So a guy that you would think is going to be in Baltimore forever, Adley Rutschman, I almost can guarantee you that he's going to be traded or something in this offseason. Well, what else must I do? Behind the glass, because we have a couple of different people. Vincent Los Pinuso is producing and engineering, along with the old regular Jonas Jackson. Actually, he's not very old, but he's an old regular. Kevin Drosch is along with us, too, and that's our little crew to get me through this hour. We have a great guest coming up. More on her later, and we're going to go for a break. So let's see, it's, 13 past the hour, time for a break. And where is the break going to occur? At 77 WABC. And now it's my pleasant duty to go to the 77 WABC ActionCarting.com phone line, New York City's premier waste and recycling provider. With us now is a terrific football analyst you see here all the time on the NFL Network channel. I see her all the time because I watch NFL a lot, and we welcome Judy Batista to our show. Hello, Judy.
Hi, John. Great to be with you.
Well, it's very nice. I must add that Judy is the wife of Anthony McCarron, who's already been on the show twice, I want you to know. And,
I know.
And
I'm
doing
trying to catch up.
doing a brilliant job, I might add. Well, Judy, we're now facing the NFL season. We're all great NFL fans. And how shall we begin? Let's begin with the Jets and their new quarterback, Justin Fields. Some of your thoughts.
Well, I think they've been pretty conservative with him so far, right? We have not seen a ton of explosive plays, which was something that he didn't show in Pittsburgh either, that either they didn't call them for him or he wasn't executing them. But that was a concern. I think you're going to see more of that as the season develops and as they get further along with him being comfortable in the offense. They have Garrett Wilson, who is just a spectacular wide receiver and was Justin Fields' college teammate. So the chemistry already exists between those two. But otherwise, they're high on Justin Fields. Like Aaron Glenn is really confident in Justin Fields' development and has said really since Justin Fields joined the team, Aaron Glenn has said he thinks he's nowhere near reaching his ceiling, that we've still got a long way to go of what we're going to see of Justin Fields. They want him to use his legs more than he has, that he did in Pittsburgh or even in Chicago for that matter. So I think as the season gets going and they all get more comfortable with each other and more comfortable with an offense, don't forget everybody's new here now, I think the hope certainly is that we're going to see a fuller picture of Justin Fields' game.
You know, a couple of years ago, Judy, I heard that he was with Chicago then, and I heard a couple of people who I respected, NFL types, and they said, Justin Fields has all the talent. He not only has great legs, but he has a tremendous arm, and we haven't seen that. Now, you know and I know, if you believe anything that happens in an exhibition game, you're in a lot of trouble. And as you said, they didn't allow Justin Fields to throw the ball downfield. Now, I don't care how well you run the ball. You can't win in the NFL unless you can throw the ball downfield.
Right. You need explosive plays. I mean, that is the game now. You need to be able to get chunk yardage. You need to be able to go downfield, which is, frankly, in Pittsburgh last year, they were winning games with Justin Fields. That is why Mike Tomlin made the move to Russell Wilson, because he wanted more explosive plays. And we know that, Russell Wilson is obviously much older, but he can still throw that ball down the field, right? He can still wing it, and that's what they wanted more of in the offense. So we will see if the Jets get there. Again, I would say everything is new at the Jets, right? It's a new offensive coordinator. All of the players are getting used to that offensive coordinator and what the offense is going to look like. Aaron Glenn has to make it clear what he wants in the offense. So I do think that takes a bit of time to get everyone on the same page. And I suspect that as they get going, we will see more of what they want Justin Fields doing. And that will have to include throwing the ball down the field. He can do it physically. There's no question about it.
Well, we'll see what Justin Fields does. But, Judy, when you look at it, he has a long leash. This isn't the Giants where they have all these quarterbacks or the Cleveland Browns. They don't really have Tyrod Taylor will back him up. But you want to see Fields. So wouldn't you agree with that he has a long leash as quarterback?
I do think he's got a long leash. And listen, and Aaron Glenn is in his first year as a coach, so he's got a long leash. Like, I think they understand, I think, in the building that they don't want to use the word rebuilding, but they're resetting everything, right? They blew it up last year. They went all in on putting everything around Aaron Rodgers. It didn't work out. Oh. And so then they blew a ton of stuff out. Obviously the coaching staff changed. And then the quarterback changed. There was Devontae Adams is gone. So this is a reset for the Jets. And it's not that I think that they're going to be happy if they win 2 games. I'm not saying that. But I do think that they understand, this might not be a 14-win season, that this is a growth process, and this is the first step on the path back.
Well, they need a path because they haven't made the playoffs in, 10 years?
It's been a long time. Long time.
Yeah, New York football has not been good.
No.
Judy, you're much, 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 much younger than I am, but do you vaguely recall Warner Wolf on
Yes, I
TV
do, of course.
years ago, and Warner Wolf one night said the Giants and Jets had both lost again, and Warner Wolf said, "Bring pro football back to New York." My best Warner Wolf.
No.
So,
oh, no.
so that's the Jets. We obviously will have to discuss this a little more in depth. But now the Giants. You know this city. I do a joke all the time, Judy, that when you lose a game, you're the worst team ever in the history of that game. When you win a game, championship. So
That's right. That's right.
there's no middle ground. You go right from being terrible to. But the Giants have hope. First of all, Russell Wilson's a very good quarterback. Pittsburgh made the playoffs last year. He may not be the same player he was with Seattle. And now this city is getting unbelievably excited about Jackson Dart. What are your some of the thoughts?
Well, the Giants organization is pretty excited too. They feel much better about their quarterback situation than they have for a few years. First of all, they love not just what Russell Wilson can still do. You're right; he's not the player he was in Seattle, but he's still better than they've had. They also love the leadership and the positivity he has brought. Somebody said to me when I was at a training camp, like, this team needed that. Like, they needed, if you watch him at practice, and you'll see it during games, he talks to everybody on the team, and he's pumping them up, right? Like, he talks to the guys on defense. Like, he's very positive. Like, that's not an act. And so that team needed that. And then Jackson Dart, I mean, obviously, every team that has a promising young quarterback is excited. He's really brought a great deal of anticipation. And the plan since they drafted him has been sit him, let him learn without the pressure of having to start. You've got Russell Wilson there. The hope is that things are going so well and they're winning games that you're not even thinking about making a change at quarterback. The obvious question is that realistic? They have an extremely difficult schedule this year. By strength of schedule from last year, they have the hardest schedule in the NFL. And it's a particularly hard schedule in the first half of the season. They don't even have a bye week until week 14. So it's a very tough road. The team, I think, is better. I don't think there's any question the team is better. It might not be reflected as much in the record because the schedule is so difficult. And so then the question will be, if they're not winning games, even if Russell's playing okay, the question is, will they make the move to get the rookie on the field? Because he at least presumably is going to be your future. And he, as you said, you have to take everything you see in preseason with a grain of salt. Yeah. But he has looked very good in the preseason. He operates with confidence. He can run the offense. Like, he's aggressive. He's a little bit cocky, which I think they need to. You can see the players sort of rallying around him. So I think that's going to be the question that's going to hang over the Giants this year is if they're not, blowing everybody's doors off and winning all the games, which would be difficult again because the schedule is so hard, at what point will they want to get Jackson Dart onto the field?
Well, that is the question. They have a very tough beginning. And I'll ask you an aimless question because there's nothing in back of it, but they play so many tough teams, it wouldn't be surprising if they were, let's say, 1-4 after 5 games, something like that.
Not at all surprising.
No,
not at all surprising.
Would they make the move then?
I don't know. I think it will depend on how Russell is playing. Like, I really believe them that they do not want to rush Jackson Dart out there. Having said that, he's looked really good, and maybe he is looking better even than they expected at this point. But I think so much is going to go into it. Like, how's the offensive line playing, right? Which is an eternal question for the Giants. Like, how does the offensive line look? Is Andrew Thomas back? Is he there? Could they protect Jackson Dart? The last thing you want to do then is put a rookie out there and have him get beaten up. So I think it's going to be a test of their patience. We've been saying that really since they drafted him and were insistent that they did not want to put him on the field. It's going to be a test of their patience, because especially after what we've seen in the preseason, because it has been tantalizing. But certainly, it's very possible that they start the season that the record is rough to start the season. There's no question about it, and that may not be because Russell Wilson is playing bad. It just may be because they're playing, the defending champion. They're playing the Chiefs. They're playing Washington. It's a very tough slate.
Indeed, it is, and we don't know yet. And I agree with you. I guess it's how they play. And after all, this is a losing team. This has been a losing team for a number of years. So when they go into the season, they shouldn't be a favorite in many of these games. Something great that Pro Football did, Judy, when the Jets line up for their first game on September 7th or 8th, I can't remember the date, they're going to play Pittsburgh. And who do you think is going to quarterback for the Steelers? Isn't that great?
It's fantastic, and certainly that would not be a 1 o'clock game if they had been sure that Aaron Rodgers. Remember, at that point he hadn't signed yet. We knew that he had talked to the Steelers. We knew the Steelers wanted him, but he hadn't signed. Certainly, if he had been signed by that point, that would not be a 1 o'clock game. We would be watching that at 4:25 or on Sunday Night Football. But that is going to be. I mean, what fun that's going to be.
Oh,
it's a double revenge game, right? It's a revenge game for Justin Fields, too. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Terrific. One line I've loved, I bet you've thought of it, too. Aaron Rodgers, when he was a Jet and was kind of running the franchise, he was quarterback and general manager. But he said, what the Jets have to do is they got to stop listening to the outside noise. They got to block the outside noise. Well, the only thing is the outside noise was Aaron Rodgers.
Right. Yes, things are. Aaron Glenn, when he became the head coach, said he wanted to move in silence, and that has certainly been the case. Right? It has been a quiet, business-like. There hasn't been any sort of. You're not having to watch Pat McAfee to see what the quarterback is saying. It's been very under the radar, and that is by design for the Jets.
Indeed. Have you heard anything about Aaron Rodgers? How is he playing in training camp?
Yeah, I was at Steelers training camp in Latrobe. He looks fine. First of all, physically, he looks great, which is not surprising. He's another year removed from the Achilles injury, and so no surprise he looks good. He looks in great shape. He obviously came in late. He signed right before minicamp, so he admitted they're still learning in training camp. He was still learning Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, what he likes. He was still learning about his teammates. His teammates were still learning about him. He also, Aaron Rodgers, has kept things very under the radar. He has not been nearly as vocal in Pittsburgh as he was with the Jets, right? He did not want all of his former teammates on the team. That wasn't happening. And I'm sure that's a respect thing for the Rooney family and Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan, their general manager. So I thought he looks good. The days I was there, he looks pretty good. There were still some missed connections, like just timing things, but they'll get that. This is a team that makes the playoffs no matter what. I mean, they've incredibly made the playoffs with not great quarterback play for a long time. Even the last few years of Ben Roethlisberger, he wasn't Ben Roethlisberger who was, going to the Super Bowl. And they keep making the playoffs. So it's hard to imagine that if you get any kind of Aaron Rodgers play, and I'm not talking Aaron Rodgers MVP level play, I'm just talking average level Aaron Rodgers play. The goal here is to not just make the playoffs, but make a push. And we'll see if they can do that, but I'd be surprised if they don't make the playoffs. Let's put it that way. If he's healthy, as long as he's healthy.
Well, you have to believe in Mike Tomlin because he makes the playoffs every year, and he hasn't had a quarterback since Roethlisberger retired. Judy, this is kind of an unfair question, but kind of like an overview. What do you see in football? Could Philadelphia repeat? Are the Cowboys going to be any good? Is Kansas City going to be great again? Will Josh Allen ever get there? I mean, it's unfair to ask you that, but just your thoughts.
Well, I'll try to take them in order. Can Philadelphia repeat? Yes. They have a very good roster and obviously are well coached. Having said that, it's really hard to repeat in the NFL. We've seen that. The Chiefs have sort of blown that out of the water, and the Patriots before them. but it's really hard to repeat. But they have a very good roster, and they're an extremely well-run team, right? Howie Roseman is just brilliant at when they lose a player, they either have one in the pipeline or he finds one. I expect them to win the division for sure. So they'll be in the playoffs, and would I be surprised if they at least go to the Super Bowl again? No, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Will the Cowboys be good? Man, I don't know. The Micah Parsons situation is so ridiculous at this point that they cannot come to an agreement here, and that Jerry seems to be dug in. I don't understand why they are doing that. He is their best player. They have no chance of being good if he's not playing.
Right.
I don't know if he intends to sit out. Like, if there's not a new contract, will he play on the old contract? I don't know. He hasn't said that.
Well, I just want to add one thing. I don't have a tremendous feeling of pity for either Parsons or McLaurin. I love both of them as players. I wouldn't care if they were able to extract $100 million a year. I mean, they should try to do that.
Of course.
But at the same time, Parsons is making $15 million this year. So as far as sitting out, how stupid would that be? Take the money, put it in the freezer,
in there. Right.
And next year he'll be a free agent.
Well, but then they can franchise tag him. He wants the long-term security.
Right. I don't blame him.
Contract. And the market has gone completely crazy and has far surpassed that $15 million. Just like in McLaurin's case, the wide receiver market has exploded around him. So I don't know what's going to happen with Micah Parsons. I don't know how that's going to be resolved. We are getting really, really close to the start of the season, though, without a resolution and without any negotiating going on.
Right.
So that's odd. So I don't know if Dallas is going to be good. They're not going to be good if he's not on the field. So that's the bottom line there.
Yeah, if I was Parsons, this is me. I'm a very pragmatic person. I would go on the field and take the money and put it in the freezer. Now, one question for you. You have to wait for, I gather, for your network to tell you where you're going. Opening game, do you follow the Giants? Do you look at the Jets?
Oh, no. Steelers, Jets. As soon as we saw the schedule in May, we said, well, that's where I'll be on the opener. So that's where I will be.
That's great. That's great. I can't wait to hear your thoughts about Rodgers coming into the Meadowlands. It's really good. Judy, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
You're great. You're as good as Anthony, I want you to know.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. And I plan to have you on during the year, okay?
I look forward to it, John. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. That was Judy Batista of the National Football League Network. And we're going to have a break, because that's how I feel. And then we'll get back. We have another great guest coming up. And, the Yankees got beaten today 12-1. And I can't wait to hear what this guest has to say. He's a very strongly opinionated person. So we're getting back in a moment, and it will be right here at 77 WABC. Sweeney Murdy has been a friend of mine for a long time. We worked at WFAN together. Sweeney was the reporter voice on the Yankee broadcast for years and years, and he joins us here. Sweeney, it's not a very good time to be a Yankee fan, and they got moitered today, 12-1 by Boston. They've lost 8 or 9 in a row to Boston. What's going on?
Yeah, things haven't looked up for the last couple of months, have they? It
No.
seems like everybody that comes out of that bullpen seems to be giving up some runs. When you can't beat Boston, John, do you remember in 2009 the Yankees could not beat the Red Sox at all to start the year? Remember, now they were a better team, obviously, and they played better than this. But I think at the beginning of the year, I think they lost something like 7 of their first 8 or 8 of their first 9 to the Red Sox. And the question was, Joe Girardi had just missed the playoffs in his first year in 2008, and here he could not beat Boston to save his life for the first 2 months of the season. And the question was, are you ever going to be able to beat them? And, we all know what the history books say that 2009 ended up being, right? They ended up coming back, and they stormed back, and I think they beat Boston 9 of their last 10 or something like that. And obviously a juggernaut team that won over 100 games won the World Series. This team isn't quite as good, and they're They're a good team when Aaron Judge and the rest of the guys hit. They're a good team when Max Fried is Max Fried. They still have to figure out, they try to address the bullpen at the deadline, and I think they're still trying to figure out how it goes. But, John, again, going back to history, that you just never know who's going to perform for you in a big spot. And you remember very well, I'm sure, that in 1996, Graham Lloyd and David Weathers couldn't have pitched worse in the regular season after the Yankees traded for them. Fans were listening. Go look up their numbers. ERAs are like 7 or 8 in the regular season. And then they were lights out in the postseason. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, my gosh, look at these great guys. Couldn't have won without them. They were terrible in the regular season. I think you just got to hold out hope that some of these things line up and maybe a team gets hot. And maybe, somebody, loses teams lose games in the playoffs they don't expect to all the time. And it changes the shape of the series. And you see how they respond. And you kind of just, get into the dance and see what happens.
Well, I certainly do remember how bad Lloyd and Weathers had to get sent back to the first game he pitched was in Kansas City, and it was, 800 degrees and humidity. And, I mean, he was done after an inning or two. And they sent him back to the minors, and when he came back, he pitched so great in the playoffs. You're right, Sweeney, they would not have won without him. Now, Graham Lloyd, I do have a little story about that. Graham Lloyd was injured when he came over. Didn't make George very happy, and he was terrible. And so Joe Torre, when he had to make up the playoff roster, and he had a couple of lefties in mind, and he called up his buddy Bob Uecker. Uecker and Torre had actually shared a place in Atlanta when they both played for the Braves. I would say that must have been a wild place. Anyway, he called Uecker and he said, tell me about Graham Lloyd. And Uecker said, you're going to love him. He's great and he's fearless. Just let him get healthy. And without Graham Lloyd, imagine what Ryan Klecko thinks. He got him out every time. So, but one thing, Sweeney, I agree with you. It's been an inconsistent year. And I told a story how I went to Baltimore in '64 at the beginning of September. The Yankees were 6 games out, and they rallied to win before they fell apart from '65 on. I don't know if the Yankees are a good enough team. What are your thoughts?
I mean, they're not playing good enough. It's they've certainly not had a consistent enough lineup top to bottom, and the pitching is I think you knew it was going to be an uphill battle when Garrett Cole got hurt at the beginning of the year, but and you were going to lose him for the whole season. But Max Fried was outstanding in the first half. Hit a little bump, and now you hope he's kind of back to where he needs to be. Carlos Rodon, same thing, was pitching very well in the first half of the season. And if you've got guys like that, John, who can pitch you a couple of good games in a series, you've got a chance. I think the biggest problem the Yankees have right now is understanding and believing that they know they can lock down a game with a lead. That's such a huge thing, especially now. You used to be able to sit there and say, well, we've got these starters and you're going to go 8 innings and hand it to the closer. It's really not how it works anymore, right? No. The biggest advantage to scoring first and taking a lead is you can deploy your relievers the way you want them, the way you want to. Now, the downside of that is those guys have to do their job, right? Like you can line it up and say, okay, I want this guy in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. One of them has a bad day, gives up a couple of runs. You're kind of backpedaling now and scrambling some more. And, that's how postseason series change for me very quickly. But I think you see teams that just get in. A couple of years ago, you had the D-backs at 80-something wins get all the way to the World Series. And it happens all the time, John. The Phillies did the same thing year before that. And you see these teams in the 80-something win. If you have a team has about 86 or 88 wins, you're a little over 500, which means you are not a great team. You're inconsistent. You're a little over 500, but those teams can get hot, and I think that's all you're rooting for at this point for the Yankees.
Yes,
you're not dreaming about a 100-win juggernaut right now. What you're hoping for is that they can somehow manage to survive the tough series they have and then blister through all the White Sox, Orioles, Twins, and Nationals they have coming up over the course of the next 5.5 weeks of the season, because those are all easily winnable games. And when the Yankees play those teams, they show you they are better than them. They're not as good as the teams in front of them. They are much better than the teams behind them. They're in this weird, nebulous, mediocre kind of team. Mediocre can become better if you just get hot at the right time. And I think that's all they're kind of hoping for.
Well, I think I agree with you. I think that's what they have to hang their hat on. They're going to go on a thing where they win 8 or 9 in a row, which they really need to do. That what bothers me, Sweeney, is that when you look at the Yankees, they have problems in the bullpen. They have problems in the field. They have problems running the bases. And they have problems scoring if they don't hit a home run. And so that scares me. Now, I'd said this on the air at the beginning. Whoever you name that the Yankees have to play if they make the playoffs, Detroit or Houston or Boston or Toronto, I wouldn't be afraid of any of those if the Yankees would play well. But let's face it, they haven't played very well. We have many other areas to get into, and we will get into those areas, I might add. So, Sweeney, stay right where you are. We're going to pay a few bills for the station, and we'll do that here at 77 WABC. Now, let's go to the 77 WABC ActionCarting.com phone line, New York City's premier waste and recycling provider. We're talking with Sweeney Murty, who works a lot for MLB. He left the Yanks a couple of years ago. And I just got a note from our news department. Zach Wheeler is going to need surgery, and he's going to be out 6 to 8 months. So the Phillies, that's some bad break. That's their number one pitcher.
Thoracic outlet syndrome, tough to come back from. You say 6 to 8 months, but there's a history of pitchers. Phil Hughes was one of those guys too. Phil Hughes had that and was never quite the same when he came back. That happened to him in Minnesota after he had a very good year there. But it's not an easy thing to come back from, and you're in a part of the season now too where you don't have the ability to recover from things like that. If you remember just a couple of years ago, that's why the new trade rules too, the deadline, that really impacted the way, teams really kind of have to roll the dice in the last 2 months of the season. You used to be able to make these trades after July 31st. You'd call the post-waiver deadline, and you'd sneak star players with big contracts through waivers, and you'd still be able to make some moves in the month of August to fortify your team. That stopped a couple of years ago, and it ends up being bad luck for a lot of these teams when you suffer injuries in August and you can't go out and get anybody from somewhere else. The Yankees, was it 3 or 4 years ago, I forget now, they had those injuries in the first week of August. Anthony Rizzo, DJ LeMahieu, and Matt Carpenter all went down by like August 10th or 12th. Well, you're stuck. You can't go trade for another Anthony Rizzo, DJ LeMahieu, or Matt Carpenter. You got to fill those spots from within. And that was part of the downfall that year, is that they just couldn't recover from injuries to those players. I had a general manager one time tell me, John, he said he was being asked a question about losing one of his best players and how do you replace them. And he said, there is no contingency plan for your best players. And I thought it was brilliant, because every time, a Derek Jeter or an Aaron Judge or David Wright or Pete Alonso or one of these guys gets hurt, we say, all right, well, bring up somebody else, or do this, do that. You're not getting another one of those guys. Those carbon copies don't exist. You kind of stem the tide until your best players can come back. And if they don't come back, well, it's tough sledding. And, that's the Phillies are not replacing Zach Wheeler.
No.
They have some other capable pitchers.
Oh, no.
They have some other really good pitchers, and they're still a good team. But they're not putting another Zach Wheeler 2.0 into the rotation to take his place.
Yeah, it's very tough. When people give these predictions, I guess we all do, but when they give predictions about what's going to happen in the playoffs, I often want to ask them, well, who are you going to play in the playoffs? And by the way, Who's going to be injured? Who's going to be injured on their team?
Not only that, John, but who's going to blow a lead in the ninth inning? Because they all do. If you go back just last postseason, look at all the teams that were in position to win games, and their closer blew the game. And all of a sudden, you're reeling because you've lost a very important game. You've used up you ran the game plan to perfection. You hit and pitched for 9 innings and played great defense, or for 8 innings, whatever it is, and then you lose the game in the ninth. And then you're starting over tomorrow, and you're down a game because you lost this one. That's hard to recover from. And I think you see it in the postseason. Most teams don't. Only one is obviously left standing. That's the kind of thing. Aaron Boone likes to use the phrase, you get punched in the mouth. What happens? Well, this is what happens late in the season, in a postseason. You lose 3 out of 4 in September. You got to figure out how to bounce back. You lose a ninth inning lead in a postseason game. Man, you got to get yourself back there tomorrow and try to win it. That's why the Yankees were so lucky for all those years, because they had Mariano. And you know that 2 times where he blew big games, the Yankees lost those series, because those are not easy to recover from.
I was going to tell you that the problem with all this is we were spoiled for so many years by having Mo. And let's go over to the Mets. It'd be fair to them to include them in our little baseball talk. The Mets absolutely drive me crazy. They have their top 6 hitters in the lineup are terrific. One after the other after the other. And then of the 4 kids that they play, they all have one thing in common. They're not good hitters yet, but they all have one thing in common. They can all hit it out. So what do you make, Sweeney, of the Mets' problems this year?
A lot of the same thing, just some inconsistency and waiting for they obviously pitch very well for a large portion of this season. It's hard to say, John. And they're in a position now, like, this is one of the things too, like, when you see teams, I love watching this arc for teams, because when you think you're a good team and you get into the postseason and then you end up losing, you got to start over again the next year, right? And you're 0-0, and you got to build that climb back up. It's where the Mets found. The Yankees and Mets both found themselves in the same position. The Yankees obviously just had to go a little further last year in the World Series, and the Mets around before. But you get into this position where you got to build it back up again, and it's hard. Right, it's hard to come all the way back here and get through the grind of the season again. But you're right; they've got a lot of really good hitters in the top of that lineup. And I think I don't like predicting. I don't like sitting there telling everybody, "Here's what I think is going to happen," because how the hell do I know?
Me too.
You watch what happens. I like watching what happens, and all I like to think of, John, and I used to do this every year in the beginning of the season with the Yankees, and even heading into the postseason. I just like to look at the beginning of the season. I would say, do I think they're good enough to win 90 games? And if I think they're good enough to win 90 games, then I think they're good enough to be a playoff team. And then let me see what they look like when they get to the playoffs. Like you said, who's hurt? Who's playing well? Who's all that? So both these teams, I think, are good enough to be in that kind of discussion to get to the postseason. Now let me see what it looks like. Now let me see who they're playing. And honestly, John, I think you used to say this a couple of times. You can't predict baseball, right?
A couple of times.
I think I heard you say this once or twice, and that's why I love watching this, because as much as I think, or you think, or somebody else out there listening thinks this is who's going to win, and this guy's terrible, and you just don't know. I think both these teams are pretty good, and I love Edwin Diaz at the back end of Mets games. How strong he's come back, and I know he gave up on the other night, but you look at how strong he is back there. Every team is looking for something like that, right? And I think that you just kind of wait to see here, and it is a much longer run. We talk about, like, back in the old days. Well, back in the old days, you used to have to win 4 games and you win a World Series, or then you have to win 7 games and win a World Series. You have to win 11 games, maybe more if you get into this first round, in the wild card round. It is a long stretch. You've got to play well for an entire month through all these different series. It is not even the teams that win 100 games have a hard time. So I just think it's fun because it's great baseball. It's great theater and entertainment, and I love watching it every October because we don't know who's going to win. That's the fun part, John.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why when people make these predictions, they make predictions about the playoffs. You don't even know who you're going to play. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. Are you unbelievably surprised that the Dodgers have struggled? Right now they're in a flat-foot tie with San Diego. I think they play tonight. They're both 73 and 56. Well, I guess people figured the Dodgers would be a whole lot better than that, but they didn't count on all the injuries.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And, you can say at the beginning of the year, again, this goes back to what we were just talking about. We're saying, are they going to win 110 games? Are they going to win 120 games? Are they going to win 130 games? Is anybody going to challenge them? Man, then one pitcher gets hurt after another, and you're in this spot where it's just not that easy. That's the biggest thing. I mean, they're running. I think they ran at one point. I think they had an entire pitching staff, like 12 pitchers on the injured list. They got Snell back and they got Kershaw back, and that's certainly helping. But again, you're relying on a lot more than just a couple of starters these days. These are 6-inning pitchers at best. So I think if they can figure themselves out to get a healthy pitching staff into October, they're obviously as good as we think they are. And goodness, Mookie Betts really still hasn't recovered from that little bout of his early in the season when remember he got sick and he lost a bunch of weight, and it just hasn't been a great year for him. But I'm still going to be a little scared when I see, Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman coming up in the first inning. And Teoscar Hernandez is pretty good too, right? And Kiki Hernandez gets every big hit you ever wanted him to get. So that's still a really good team. I think it just shows you what that regular season is like, because it's just never, it's the baseball regular season. It's hard to sit here and say this is the best team because we watch them all so closely now, John. We watch every out a player makes. We watch every loss a team has, right? Like I can maybe you're an exception, John, but I never saw Joe DiMaggio make an out. I've seen like 12 hits of his the entire time. I've seen every one of Aaron Judge's outs. I saw every one of Derek Jeter's outs, right? And I see a team now lose 70 games a year. And I take those 70 games and you look at them and you say, boy, they stink. All right, but what about the 90 they won? Those were pretty good too. I think the Dodgers are kind of in that boat now where they just have to survive here. But you're right, San Diego is really good too. And they did the same thing I was talking about a few minutes ago. They're the ones who've gotten close and lost and had to start over, and might be their time to be on a mission this year.
San Diego really loaded up on their bullpen. And as we know from the great bullpen days of Mo and a few others, you can win that way. I mean, if you can hang in there and get the lead, you can win that way. Quickly, Sweeney, we're running out of time. It's going too quickly. Are you amazed at Milwaukee? They have the best record in the major leagues. I've already said that Pat Murphy is my manager of the year in the National League. I thought Alex Cora in the American League. Anyway, give us some thoughts on Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about how the Yankees haven't won like 8 or 9 in a row. Like the Braves, the Brewers have had 2 winning streaks, like a dozen games, right? Like that's a separator right there. I like to see what happens when teams settle from those winning streaks and what happens. And they settled in a pretty good spot. Central Division, both leagues has never always been very strong. So if you get one great team that kind of stands out, they're going to look better. They're one of these teams that last year got into the playoffs and found themselves losing a big game late, obviously to the Mets. So and see how they react to that. They're having a great year. I hope they can figure out how to celebrate that. But it all starts over in October again. Want to see how those players react in that spotlight. But those 2 long winning streaks, man, that'll set you up for a year.
Well, that's what they have done is tremendous. They do more with less than any team in baseball. Sweeney, I love you, so you have to come on again. You're terrific, and we shall call, and you shall come on, right?
John, I love you too. Thanks so much for having me, and it was nice hearing your call the other day when you asked me, and I'm here for you anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sweeney Murti, everyone. We have to skedaddle. Vinny Madunio is coming up next with great music. Vincent Lospinoso and Jonas Jackson and Kevin Drosch have been the guys behind the glass. And it's about time for me to go, right? Right. I'll see you next Saturday from 4 to 5. I love doing this. And this is John Sterling. It's been a pleasure.